Welcome to another wonderful talk on the Positive Future podcast at Pain Free, all the P's, PPP. And today we have the wonderful Jude Evans, and she's bringing a talk to us, which I think is quite tough, but very important and something we all deal with. We all deal with death in our lives, whether it's thoughts about your own death or maybe near-death experiences or something, but we all deal with death all through our lives, whether it's a loved one or a squash fly or our loved pets or our friends or people that we don't even know. We deal with death all the time. And I think it's a really important subject. I met Jude last year at Camp Out, and I was really I for one second I wondered, like, is that going to be a good thing to bring on the podcast? Positive future, bring in death. Come on. And I thought, no, this is really important actually. And the moment I started to talk to Jude, I just felt her love and warmth and light and humor she brings to this challenging subject. I thought, that's it. And it's taken me a little while to get you here, Jude. I finally dragged you over. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking part on the Positive Future podcast and sharing your knowledge with us and guidance. So, Jude, without further ado, if I can pass it to you, and who are you? Why are you doing this? What made you want to share and help people in this area of life?
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for all coming to listen to this very important subject, in my opinion. So where to start? I think probably the best place to start was the death of my father, which was 8 years ago. And he had Alzheimer's. So it was the long goodbye. And I started to realize with the long goodbye, it's um almost like a universal thing, saying you have an opportunity to be able to process this as you're going along. Some people don't get an opportunity to process anything because death can hit. So I'm not sure what's worse or better for those that are left behind. My personal opinion, if we get an opportunity to say goodbye, then if we can use that time well, um, that has got to be infinitely better than being left in a state of grief with a whole load of what ifs and if onlys and regrets. Because for me, that deepens grief, and that gives rise to the expression grief is love with nowhere to go. But if you do have the opportunity to be able to say a goodbye, then we can use that time well if we're courageous enough to be able to face it and accept it, which is where so many people can't. A denial can go into the body deeply and they refuse to acknowledge it. And obviously when death comes, the shock is huge. The weight of grief is huge. However, in the aftermath, we can console ourselves by saying, I got to say goodbye. I got to tell my loved one how much I love them, how to thank them for my life, if it's a parent or if it's a sibling or any family member. We get the opportunity to say what comes up from our heart. And obviously that's different things for different people. Some people might want to ask for forgiveness, or there's a whole life between the two people, the dying and the bereaved. And I got the opportunity, despite my family's protestations, because they went into deep denial, even though my father was dying right before their eyes, and it was as clear as day. There was only me that could acknowledge that, and there was only me that was able to deal with it. And I sat and held his hand every night in the last week of his life and told him, I thanked him for being a wonderful father, spoke on the family's, it's like he'd been a wonderful grandfather, and told him we were all ready, um, and grateful to him for doing such a good job, you know. And I do recall saying, I do feel now your work is done. That might have been quite pertinent. And my father, although he had Alzheimer's and he'd lost his ability to speak several months prior to that, every time I told him that, he squeezed my hand. And to this day, I will always believe that he could not only hear me, he could understand me as well. And I will forever believe through that I helped him to transition peacefully, and whatever fears he was carrying, they were helped to be allayed through knowing that he was deeply loved and his life had been worthwhile. And none of my family could say anything. That they sat there quite numb, um, and didn't tell him he loved him because they just didn't have any tools or language to be able to to put into expression what it was they felt, so deep and repressed, if you like,
Mm.
and fearful of death. Whereas I think where it came from me, I had an experience many years ago, and I'm not going to go into that because it's not that relevant unless somebody wants to ask me a question about it. But that made me very death positive, if you like. And that came from a belief of, for me personally, dying wasn't the end. It was just a continuation on the cycle of life. That's a personal view. But for me, that enabled me to really start reading up on sort of philosophy and the ancient texts and scriptures, leading to reading books like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and drawing great comfort from that as I went deeper and deeper into my own mortality, because that's what it was, an exploration about. Who am I? Why am I here? What is this all about? And I don't think you can really go as deep as you want to, unless you include mortality and death as part of that exploration. So I kind of, although I hadn't really faced death before, and my father was the first person that I was actually present with, um, just intuitively, I knew what I needed to say to him. And I knew if I didn't express it, there would be forever regret. Because when we're in a regret, it's the words come easy then. Why didn't I say this to him? Why didn't I say that to him? But I didn't have that fear, I had that acceptance, so I was able to say it. So after the initial grief and deep shock and weight, I actually felt really proud of myself, um, that I helped my father to transition. And his last words were, "You are loved. You have been an amazing father." Um, and that, whether that brought my father peace, I wouldn't know, but it certainly brought me a great deal of peace. And I know
Jude,
my brother carries regret because he said, "I should have told him I loved him. I should have told him I loved him." So, you know, um,
so Jude, what was different about you then? Because you sound like you said the only one that took this path, and you were very glad of it, and it made you feel proud of yourself. And what was different then? What do you think? Is there anything that do you feel that was different, or just something that naturally came to you, this different approach rather than the way that your family did?
it
What
came
made you?
naturally to me because I was unafraid and I was curious as well. I was
About
really
death.
and being bearing witness um, to somebody actually dying as well. And I almost feel like my father showed me how to live, and he also showed me how to die with great courage.
That's really interesting.
Well,
That's an interesting point of view, I think.
mm, yeah.
And I know when my father died, I felt, and I feel this with other, not so much with other people, but specifically with my father, I felt a piece of me went with him or wanted to go with him. And I felt a draw or a pull or my spirit connected or something. And that took about 2 or 3 years. And I thought, what's that? That's like, is it we're here and we're sort of a way of understanding the process of death, maybe? And a part of me, obviously, a part of me, I want my dad, or something. And I wonder whether that's anybody else's experience, whether they felt a part of them going with them. And I understood it as I was learning what's death and what's the process and a part of grief. Not to mention, the emotional and the all the changes that took place having my father removed, all the kind of juggle of the family and my position in it or my position in my life. I felt that going on as well. But the actual sort of process of death, I felt myself going with him, part of me. Did you get, do you know what I'm talking about? Does anyone else have something similar? Maybe it's just me.
Okay. Um, Something that I don't normally share with people, 'cause it's so deeply personal. As my father was taking his last breaths, and again, I intuitively knew, it's almost like a pair of unseen hands pushed me, and I leant in really closely, and I think my intention, but I'm not even sure I had an intention, was to kiss him one last time. And what I found myself doing was actually taking his last breath into my body and sort of really holding this, and then fell onto the floor. And it was only a few days later, it's like there's something different. Something's happened, and I'm not too sure what it is. But I began to realize what it is, what it was, and it was he was pouring into me. So for me, it was the complete opposite of what you just said. Um, for me, a part of me didn't go with him. He came into me, and I found myself stronger and more forthright. There was very subtle changes in my character. It became much stronger and much bolder, more willing to speak my mind,
Mm.
which was the very attributes that he held, that I loved so dearly about him. So it's almost like his main characteristics that I admired so much was suddenly in me. It was quite extraordinary. Um, and that was what led me to train to be a death doula,
Oh, wow.
directly because of the whole experience of caring for my father. Because what it also made me realize was there was so much that I didn't know about processes, and I'm a very curious person, and I wanted to know what was happening with my father at the time. But again, I didn't have a vocabulary. I didn't know how to ask the right questions of the care home team, who were wonderful. And what I also didn't know was there was no rush to leave the room once he died. You know, my mum practically fled out of the room. She just couldn't cope with it at all. And
It is a
how
weird experience. It is a weird experience, isn't it? From having a live, breathing, your
it
loved one person there, and then you've got this sort of dead body. You know, it's
absolutely, nothing can prepare anybody for that. You can
mm,
think, you're all, you're telling your loved one it's okay for them to go, but when that final breath is took, it's
so
like
you've
nothing you can describe. Anybody who's
no.
had a bereavement and been there, witness to it,
It's
would
your person,
understand that.
and what I'm hearing from you, and also Lee's said something about going with the person as well in the chat, and you have a different experience. I wonder whether it's all just very, very unique to each person what we experience. And you felt to stay in the room. I know when I saw my mum, all smelly and yellow things coming out and disgusting, I was like, all right, I didn't really want to. I was curious, but I didn't really want. I could see she was all waxy, and it wasn't her. It was her dead body, and it was smelly. And I thought, yeah, I don't want to really hang around. But I wanted to see. But perhaps it's just very, very unique. I mean, Lee says she's experienced part of me gone with them. I don't know what part, other than that part of what we had together.
Mm. So I just hold my, I don't even grieve for him actually. I think I did all my grieving um, in the final 12 months. Um, and then when he did die because of this, I'm able to just hold him in my heart. Yeah, when my mother-in-law died, that was a completely different experience,
Okay.
completely different experience. And it's because how we relate to the person in our relationship with them as well. But also our attitude towards death and how much we've considered it, how much
Mm.
we've explored it, and what we actually think happens when we do die. If we have um, beliefs around that, those beliefs can serve to give comfort. If we don't have beliefs, then we're also met with a lot of existential questions as well. And those existential questions are then asked through a different lens than if we've done um, the thinking about our immortality prior to that,
Mm.
which can in some ways prepare us for all death that we face
Our own death.
and our own death. And when I say prepare us for it gives us strength to be able to deal with, the devastating loss that can come our way at any given time. But there
Definitely.
is no
And
right
as you
way, no wrong way.
there is, it's very unique, isn't it? And that's what I picked up early on, that it's just a very unique, it takes as long as it takes, it affects you the way that it affects you, and you might want support, or you might want to closet yourself away, you might want to deny everything and just get on with your life. You
Yeah.
might like to have them by your metaphorical side every single minute. You might like to talk to that loved one all the time who's departed. But I think it's such an important subject to explore, and because it's so deep and so emotive, can be so emotive, and also I'm 50s now, and I think about death. We've had so much blooming death these last few years, haven't we? And for whatever, and I think that thinking about your own death. I mean, I believe in reincarnation, and the spirit never dies, and it's just our body that passes on. That's my belief, and I've come to that belief, and I do, as you say, I do get a lot of comfort. It's like, okay, it might be pretty awful, it might hurt, it might be pretty grim. I've seen my mother and father go through it, and it's not a lot of fun. End of life. It's quite mucky and smelly, and you know, not nice. Pain or
Well, it can be incredibly painful as well.
yeah.
So this morning, um, my partner of 33 years, his former wife died this morning. He's with her right now.
Yeah,
And
you
she,
nearly didn't make it today. You nearly weren't
no,
not going
no,
to
I
come on,
nearly
wasn't it?
didn't make it, but
This morning,
it's
gosh,
such an irony. Um, and I thought, well, no, this, I'm going to talk about it.
really poignant.
And and with her, she's quite stoic. Um, and me and him went to see her, and she didn't want to acknowledge, the fact that she was dying. She'd been told she was in a hospice, and she said, I don't care what happens. She said, I just want this pain to stop, because she was in terrible pain. She was diagnosed 6 weeks ago with lung cancer, and it very quickly went into her spine. And then as soon as the pain had stopped, um, she just said, okay, I'm ready now. The pain stopped. And all the family were with her. And I'm so glad that they didn't get to witness her writhing around in pain, because two of them did see their grandmother in pain and fighting and kicking and screaming as she did in life to the bitter end. And it was
Oh,
absolute torture. They never got the pain under control for her. So hers was a terrible death, and it's left the family completely traumatized. And now they quite, because for quite a few of them, it was their first experience of bearing witness also. And for them now, they have a lens of pain and fear around death. So for them to even want to, if I was to say to them, you really need to explore mortality, they'd be
mm.
like, you're mad, go away. I'm not thinking about that.
Not for everybody, isn't it?
And that, yeah, and that also kind of segues nicely into the taboo. Um, we are for sure a death-fearing society. We don't have coherence. As a society, we're quite fragmented. It's an individual thing. Maybe it was different when the church was very active and everybody shared, a belief about, the heaven and hell as a Christian country. Who knows? I just lost my thread.
About taboo, you're talking about taboo.
Yeah, taboo. Um, which is why I also started to attend a death cafe, because my family, going back to my father and Rob's family, none of them will talk about death. None of them. They don't want to talk about their grandmother's death. It was too traumatic. My family don't ever really talk about my dad. So I was like, why? What is this? Why won't people talk about death, So I started to attend a death cafe in Manchester. And that was a wonderful place. People go from the age of 16, and the eldest person was 92 at the time. He's now died. And the conversations that went on that table were incredible, because everybody was there for their own personal reasons, but there was an open curiosity, what other
Yes.
people thought, and
Mhm.
sharing, and opening up deep conversations. Some people were sharing personal stories, and it was actually quite a joyful place.
It's
People
it's
say to
funny.
me, "You're going
It's funny,
well?"
isn't it? Because if you're in a group discussing whatever subject, you might think everyone feels the same as you, but we've all got different approaches actually. And it
Yeah,
and it might be inspiring and
very.
soothing or supportive, maybe.
We all learn from each other. You it opens up. conversation, and that is the whole point of the Death Cafe, because everybody, the one thing that we have in common is a bit of a frustration that we can't have conversations around death. It's not something that you go out with your friend and have a cup of tea and go, oh, let's talk about death. I don't
You
think so.
don't, isn't it? It's something you don't really sort of do, and there's all kinds. I just want to say about too that exactly, and we don't have Day of the Dead. The Latinos have Day of the Dead, don't they? And then Halloween, although we celebrate it with the sweets and all that, but really it's not about that. It's about
Mm,
celebrating your ancestors. And as a therapist, I know that well, in the world, the Eastern cultures they celebrate their ancestors every single day. I um I remember doing a treatment on this young Oriental guy, and I'm in London. I think he was being a bit of a young Jack the Lad or something. And I remember when I treated him with shiatsu, which is I put my hands on his back, and my technique is a connection technique, and um, you become like a sort of vessel of healing to happen. And what happened for him was I could feel his ancestors coming in. I don't know if this too stretch too far for some people to understand, but some people know me. But it's like healing. You will become a vessel of allowing the healing to come in. But I felt his ancestors coming in, and what it felt like was he was being a bit of the Jack lad, had detached, not connecting, not engaging into his lineage, and I could feel that the ancestors are not there to sort of pick on us or tell us what to do or not to do. It was there as reassurance, as avenues, as opportunities, as knowledge to draw on, as inner guidance, all there to love you. Not anything penalizing at all, nothing wrong. I know sometimes we want to cut off from family members sometimes, but in ancestry, when we die, that's what I saw and I felt, and I experienced through ancestors. But lost my track now.
yes. The guy that you were treating, and you felt his ancestors coming in.
Yeah, and afterwards he said, "Well, what did you do to me?" And I wasn't intending to do any of that. When you do healing, you become a sort of vessel, like a phone line, for connection to happen, for healing to happen. And that's what I felt according to ancestors. But we that's what I was saying. But we don't have in this country. It's very unique and individual whether you do or don't connect with your ancestors, and
Yeah.
whether you
We
detach from
don't
them.
we don't have strong connected ritual as well. We're so hyper individualized,
Apart from the funeral, I suppose.
whereas once it was the domain of a community, and now we're left, to just get on with things.
But
My dog
there's doggy.
barking.
But I
um,
think it's something that is very, very important. That's why I thought it's so important to bring you on here, because talking about it. I mean, one lady I was treating, she walked into the clinic, and this is relevant to what we're talking about. She walked into the clinic, and she was a 40-year-old lady, but she looked like she was 12. And I was thinking in my therapy head, like, what's the matter with this lady? What does she need? What's going on here? And it turns out that when she was 12, she lost her mum. Her mum died, and because she was 12, and back in the year, and maybe even now, children aren't typically invited to funerals. And consequently, she didn't understand what went on. She didn't understand how did she die. She couldn't get her question. She had all these questions, and basically, she was stuck emotionally and mentally and physically stuck. She'd lost her dear mum, poor her, and she was stuck in a 12-year-old state. And now she was 40 and she had cancer. Um, and it was all part and parcel of that she couldn't go through the process proper grieving and questions and saying goodbye, and she was
Yeah.
set aside because she was a child, not invited,
That is
and sent to the
such a good
auntie.
point. Yeah, because it's almost like a projection, isn't it? The more that we fear, the more that we want to protect as well. So the armor goes up, but to not be able to explain to children, or have a language to explain to children, to be faced with their open, curious, existential questions. We don't do a very good job of explaining what
I
death
don't
is
think
to
so.
children. Or we never have a conversation, so the first they ever hear about it is, grandma's died. And then we're telling them through a lens of our own very raw grief. So they're then surely then picking up like, oh, that's terrible. That's just sad. That we have to cry. Everybody's upset, and that's very bewildering. Because I've got 9 nephews and nieces, and when they were younger, we've had some amazing conversations. Because they haven't really been touched by death as such, which is wonderful because they're open little vessels. But I'm more curious to know what they think rather than me telling them. I do tell them what I think, but I said that's just my opinion. Other people think
Mm.
different things. You
That's
tell
what
me
I do
what you
too.
think.
That's
And
what I do
some
too.
of the things that they've come up with have kind of just blown me away. And because they're fearless. And I
Mm.
think to myself, okay, so when it does happen, they do have some frames of reference that they've come up with themselves as well. They have got a
Yeah.
little bit of vocabulary with which to start a process with of
Mm.
grieving. But I think we
There,
do
there,
our children a great disservice by um, not having that. But again, if we haven't got a vocabulary of knowledge or done a personal inquiry, then we're not going to pass it on to our children. Why would we? We only
we're
pass
not.
on things that we know.
We're not.
Yeah,
Another reason why it's so important to kind of air your
yeah,
thoughts and feelings. I think dealing with death in all sorts of ways is just goes through and through us. It's not a sort of have a cup of tea conversation, but it's something so fundamental in our lives.
mm,
And Anthea was saying when her father died, she was relieved. I was relieved that he was out of but very bad pain. But above all, it felt like a great privilege to be with him at that time. I could easily have missed it, missed the death, but something told me to go to see him. She arrived 15 minutes before he went.
yeah. And that can be held, Anthea, can't it? You've got that precious memory of being there in that sacred space. I was relieved when my mother-in-law died.
Yeah.
After the initial shock, the first real emotion that came through was relief, because it was a
Mm.
terrible state of affairs, and I was relieved for the family as well, who were bearing witness to this screamer. It is just awful, absolutely awful.
So many
Um,
feelings, isn't it? Because it's not a nice experience. As I think most of the time, it's a pretty brutal part of our lives.
mm,
And Lee's saying, my grief over losing my husband, nursing for him 8 years, 8 years also, a relief as I couldn't bear to watch the demise, and it was a hell of a long goodbye. I've come to peace, but the loss of my son is beyond painful. Another level, finding a way to live with this pain every day requires digging deeper for strength to carry on than I ever have in my life. Even though I know he's with me in my heart, oh, get me going there as well. And energetically, his presence is felt. but the physical embodiment of him is missed beyond measure. I mean, that's such a powerful, strong connection. Our children, isn't it?
And that's
How?
not the
What would you
natural order,
say?
is it?
What would
You
you
know,
say, Jude?
we have we almost have a right to expect, don't we, that older people go before in, in a family, when a parent dies or a grandparent dies, that's bad enough. But there's almost some comfort in a natural, especially if they've reached, a good age. There's almost some comfort in a natural order. Um,
Mm.
but when that natural order isn't, it's just it's chaos. And to make sense of chaos, it's not happened to me, so I can only imagine it's a lifetime of pain, um, senseless, um, and yeah, digging deep, 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 deep into the reservoirs of stuff that we probably don't even know we've got unless we're called to find it.
I,
I'm
I wonder
so
whether,
sorry
you know,
about this one.
I, I wonder whether each of our experiences is in sharing. It's a teaching to each other. I mean, God forbid I lose my children too. I can't imagine, and I feel you, Lee, and I can't imagine. But I wonder, as you share and you share your experience and the people around you, that it's a teaching to each other. How do you deal with that? How do you live with that? Live in that experience? It's a teaching, and extremely tough, clearly. But so in your death cafe, Jude, is it so you don't teach, you allow a space for communication. Is that correct?
Yeah, just as we're doing now.
Just the
It's
same to
almost
death
like
cafes
we're
a bit like
sitting in a
this.
virtual death cafe, but you have the added comfort of, you know, um, or energetic of being, actually with people. So there's nothing off the table, as long as it's death related. So everything gets covered, everything. And people still to this day bring up things. I've never thought of that. I've never thought about things like that. So every time it's new, different people come. There's a little regular group, but people drop in and out as and when they feel they want to.
And is it
Um,
so it's a physical cafe as well as an online, or is it just the physical?
no, it's just physical.
Or just
Um,
physical? And whereabouts are you?
in Manchester, but there's really beautiful little story to be told around, because I took over the Death Cafe.
Oh,
And the reason Debbie, who ran the Death Cafe for around 8 years, the reason she started the Death Cafe in the first place was, as a Buddhist, she said she was quite comfortable with her own mortality, but she couldn't bear the thought of her mother dying. And she could see her behavior was becoming increasingly neurotic, and it began to be an obsession, putting her into a place of fear and nerves, and she was like, well, how can I overcome this? This is probably not rational. I need to do something. She read about a death cafe on the internet somewhere and thought, I'm going to start one of those up.
mm.
So she did. She started the Death Cafe in Chiltern in Manchester, and grew the cafe from nothing. And she contacted me. It was around 18 months ago, I think. And she said, I'm going to be packing the Death Cafe in, but I would really like somebody to take it over. She had a lot of commitments. She was also trained as a celebrant as well at the same time.
As a what, sorry?
Celebrant, a funeral celebrant.
Oh,
Um, and this was in part to help her overcome her fears around her mother. So she said she was, due to all sorts of commitments and life, she didn't have the space to run it anymore. So she said, "Would you like to take it over?" And I said, "I would love to take it over. I would be honoured to do that." So I took it over. But just before I took it over, she messaged me to say her mother had been diagnosed with cancer. And it was very quick, very sudden, terminal. And she was insisting on going home. She said, and because of the time in that death cafe, listening to people from all walks of life, and the other beautiful thing is you get people from different cultures as well, sharing their cultural stories. And she said, because of that death cafe, she said, I was very confident that I was able to spend 2 weeks, because that's how long it took when my mum was at home, um, being unafraid to have deep conversations with her mum.
Wow.
And she said they were so, so close in that 2 weeks. And they talked about things that they'd never talked about before because there's always tomorrow. But they also talked about their relationship, familial relationships. So she said it was the most beautiful, meaningful, saddest, emotional 2 weeks of her life. And her mum died very peacefully. Um, and there was it was a Buddhist funeral, so there's lots of people, and it was all very beautiful. So she said, but if it wasn't for the death cafe, that wouldn't have happened. She
Wow.
said I would have been blind and wondering if it was the right thing to say or not sure, or
Wow.
but she had the vocabulary to, and the words came easy despite, the intense emotion. She still found she was able to talk with her mum, and last
That's,
wishes were expressed, and
that's
whatever
amazing.
it was that went between them, which was precious and priceless.
Which is the
Um,
real value of sharing our difficult experiences, or maybe our wonderful experiences, or our,
all our
all
experiences were
the demise and the grunge of end of life, and
mm,
all the everything around it, because all the different experiences of death. It can be all different ways. It can be a sudden shock. It can be unexpected. It can be, I don't know, weird, like, I don't know, murder, or God forbid, or disappearance or something. It can be long known, like Alzheimer's, or my mother had dementia, and the long goodbye, as they say, and um, expected. So it's all different experiences, but then it's your own personal kind of connection with all of that, your own personal experience of that, and everything that goes with it. Because,
yeah, the Death Cafe just opens the way for people to talk about their experiences. We do have a young girl coming whose brother was murdered.
oh wow,
Um, and now she's finding power and strength and comfort in sharing her story as well. Because obviously we're a pretty receptive bunch. And the only prerequisite is let people speak, don't interrupt people, let them tell their story, don't hog the conversation, um, and just check to see if anybody, because not everybody wants to talk. Some people just go to listen to other people's, and it just works. It's just very organic, and I think that's because of the nature of the topic, because ultimately nobody knows what happens when we die. So it's not a place, it's not a debating place, it's just a storytelling.
share,
place.
sharing, supportive,
Yeah, I would recommend,
comforting.
anybody who's curious.
Have you got lots of tissues there?
Yeah,
I'm very empathetic, and know I feel it, but it's not easy. It's not an easy subject to lots of very emotive, and It's a very broad, individual, unique subject, isn't it? So if somebody wants to come to you, do they just email you and contact you?
Yeah, I only have an email address. I don't have social media. I try to stay off social media as much as possible, especially
Yeah,
the
that's
but yeah, you can contact me via my email address.
yeah, and I'll be sending out how to contact you with her email address with this recording, and so you'll have that if you want to contact. But then you're in Manchester, and people will be listening to this all over the world. So if wherever you are, you could start a cafe themselves, or perhaps look for a cafe in your area. Maybe start one online if you want to, whatever feels right for you. So if you don't find what you need, start it yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, I've just been invited to Manchester Gorton Library because they're now looking to set up death cafes. They want to trial it in two of their biggest libraries in Manchester, with a view to rolling it out in all the cafes, all the libraries.
Library. Oh, that's
Because I
fantastic.
thought, how wonderful is that, you know?
That's
Um,
fantastic. That's
I mean,
fantastic.
it's not a bereavement place, and that is stressed as well. Death Cafe is actually a patented name, so there's a
Oh, I see.
specific formula that goes with it. And one of the things that we're at pains to do is, please understand this is not a bereavement group. Um,
So
and
what's the
if you are
difference?
newly bereaved and you're looking for personal bereavement support, then I can signpost for that. And there is nobody there in a professional capacity as well.
Yes,
You know,
I can feel that from you because
not there as a doula.
I can feel it's a doula is a supportive. I can hear that from you that you're not offering structure and guidance. You're offering a
Counsellor.
space
Mhm.
to be supported and express and share what you want to your experiences and what
Way
you want to say.
for communities to come together and chat about the taboo subject.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and as you say, I think it's invaluable. It's so gentle, and you don't have to speak, and you can just listen. And
Mhm.
and then your friend, your Chinese, is it Chinese, the Buddhist lady, she had the benefit of that.
Mhm.
And I can see how it can be very warmly supportive. Karen says my ex-husband, my son's dad, passed away with Alzheimer's last October. It was definitely a long goodbye. He was 63 and his mum is still alive. She's 88. Goodness. I was I can't read that bit. Is I was a very traumatic it was a very traumatic death for him, but it was a relief for my son and the rest of the family because of the suffering. The suffering is a big part of, isn't it? It's really tough, it goes on for ages, isn't it? For years sometimes. I mean, both my parents had about 2 or 3 years of gradually dying, and I thought, you know, but when both my parents died, I could feel the spirit lift straight away. And straight away, I could feel in my father's stage, I could feel all that pressure and tension of the end of life and organizing around him and helping around him and all the stuff you do as people get sicker and sicker. Need more and more support. And then when he actually lifted, I felt it and I felt off my shoulders as well. I felt the same when my mum went. I don't know what you felt, Karen, but there's such a lot of suffering involved in death, isn't there? It's like it's just goes on and on and on. I used to say to my mum, "Why don't you go, mum? You can't stand all this." It's my mum couldn't speak. She's dementia. She's all like this, and she was complete ragdoll, couldn't speak. And I was like, Mom, go on, just pop off, will you now? It's like, what do you want to stay for? I mean, stay if you want, but it's not a lot of fun. It's a
Mm.
mucky old time, end of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
You felt relieved as well, Karen. Yeah, it's
I don't know if anybody's come on specifically. My dog wants a wee. Is that okay? We just let my dog out for a wee.
that's the fun of doing these live calls. Get dogs wanting wheeze and cats coming in. I don't know if anybody come on the last the last podcast, my cat walked across the computer. It was all about animal communication. How about that?
Please
Uh,
forgive him, he's a old boy.
that's okay. I was just saying, the last one we did was on animal communication and healing, and my cat never does it. She walked across the computer, everything went flying. Perfect timing. It's
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's come on specifically, because we did mention talking about euthanasia. So if anybody would like me to share some of my many thoughts on that, I'm quite happy to do so. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
please do. Yeah.
So obviously we now live in a country where euthanasia is a possibility. Before the debate, um, my view I disagree with the government being involved in euthanasia because of a safeguarding. Do I believe people have got the right to take their life? Absolutely. We can go and take our life tomorrow. Nobody can stop us, and thankfully it's not a sin anymore, as it was in the past, which was awful. Now that it's now law, I still don't feel any more comfortable around the subject
I'm
because
in
I'm a
agreement with you.
firm believer in care, um, and quality care. And I think we could, or whether I'm being a bit cynical, quality care costs a lot of money. But as also a civilized country, we shouldn't even be talking about quality care. We should automatically have that. But the sad fact is we don't. Some people receive better care than others. There is some absolute horror stories out there about people at home and not getting medication, and I understand the public's reaction, and it is a reaction, I think, rather than a response, is to, well, if I die, and I'm in pain, I want to decide not to be in pain, which for me almost it's almost like denying yourself your own death, and letting your body and the natural forces um do the work. The body knows how to die.
I agree, and also
um
spiritually, to go through the process of it's not easy, isn't it? To see the demise and go see someone deteriorate. It's not easy, but I think it's a natural human process to go through the life and death cycle. And if you don't go through that, I think you're missing the whole sort of point of the growth.
mm. See, I very much believe we're alive and processing and thinking and feeling up until the very moment we take our last breath. And even in that last 30 seconds of life, we can have a realization that can change what happens when we transition. And my views on euthanasia are very personal, as to why I wouldn't choose to opt for euthanasia. However, pain can change that, because we just want the pain to stop. We don't necessarily want to die, but we want to be pain-free. But I have serious concerns around safeguarding. But now, we've never managed to talk about death openly in society, but now we all have the option of choice. So, you're now in a terminally ill position, and you're like, to choose to die or not to. That's a very heavy psychological load that's been put into society for us to bear than one where nobody ever thought about that, because it wasn't on the table, it wasn't an option. And it's come about through people's fear of death, of pain, rather than an altruistic offering to society. We're not very good at death, and I can only begin to imagine family dynamics, one side agreeing, one side not agreeing, and the potential for rifts, for arguments at a very emotional, heartbreaking time, or
Yeah.
disagreeing with the person's decision, and then
There's
having
a
to
lot of caveats and ifs and buts, isn't
that
there?
did not exist before this. And that's why it's about care. It's about pain relief. If there is going to be, that's not always painful, especially if you're very, very old and you're just going to slip out of life. But I think that's increasingly rare because people now tend to die of illness rather than sheer old age. So I
Yeah,
don't
so
think,
this is a whole nother subject, isn't it? Which we could spend another hour on because
yeah,
it,
but
there's a
I did want to share, just in
yeah,
case anybody had popped on to hear what I had to say. To
yeah.
share
Thank
with
you,
me.
and do get in touch with Jude and join her death cafe or start one yourself or online or get conversations started with those around you if that feels right for you.
Mm,
I mean that's a whole nother. I could say lots of things too, and I just feel like it's a big subject actually, isn't it? Really, lots of comments in the chat box here.
yeah,
Um,
I need to have a look because I'm only getting snippets of
do
it.
have a look,
Has
and
anybody actually got a question that they would like to ask me? I can't read and talk at the same
yeah.
time, so maybe Anthea,
So
you could help me out here.
Anthea was saying that her father died shortly after being given a hefty injection by his doctor, and that she thinks a lot of medics help their suffering patients towards the end. And they do. It's called the Liverpool Care Pathway, and they call it a particular name or digit or code nowadays. But they are definitely doing the Liverpool Pathway, which is not a care pathway at all. But it sounds like your father went on a positive route and positive negative route. Um, and I wonder whether doctors do that. I mean, there is literally a protocol that they do, but it's I won't go into because there's another whole subject. But there it is,
It used to be
rather
called
than
a Brompton
a
cocktail.
lengthy legal process. Sorry, Jude.
It used to be called a Brompton cocktail, and it was standard practice in the NHS up until
Gosh, I
the
forgot that. Yeah.
80s. Just a
Oh my
little
gosh.
extra to help you on your way. It was normal practice. It wasn't talked about, but it was normal practice.
Wow.
And then it kind of came to light, and that was the introduction of the Liverpool care pathway. But what was happening, it was probably well ministered in some places and terribly administered in other places. And people were witnessing, without any knowledge, rightly or wrongly, was their parent, say if it was somebody's father, um, that they were starving him to death. Now, were they starving him to death, or did they not explain that, the body, it can eat right up until the final, but also for very many people, the body no longer requires fluid or food. So I think there was possibly a good attempt um, to be a little bit more enlightened about death within the NHS, but it went horribly, horribly, horribly wrong. Um, yeah, and I think, it's almost doctors are damned if they do and damned if they don't.
It
And
seems
it's
to be
down
that way.
to us to have conversations with it. They won't tell you what you're not asking for. if you have conversations with them, they will tell you as best as they are able. So some are much better at dealing with death in the NHS, and some are still, oh, it's all taboo.
So
But
it's
if you know
all as
what
long as
questions you want answered, again, that gets covered a lot at the Death Cafe as well. What kind of questions would you ask? What and then there's always probably somebody who said, "Well, I've been through that. I can tell you what I asked or what I wish I would have asked." So the more that we can know what questions we want answering, we can then ask those questions. But a lot of the time, we don't know what we don't know, and therefore we're just left at the end of it going, "Oh, you know." Yeah.
whole other set of areas that can be incredibly supported by sharing and communicating and hearing others' paths. And again, I think it's so valuable how sharing and being in some kind of group or communication in a death cafe would be great. I wonder whether I'd feel a bit sort of a bit depressing to go to a death cafe, but actually I can see the light and the love and the help, and you wouldn't even have to chat. You could just listen in, and if it's not for you, you know, don't have to be part of anything like that.
They're
Um,
really uplifting places. So you kind of expect it to be like, you can see some people walking in for the first time with like real trepidation, but there is so much laughter on the table and there's so much joy on the table.
I
Yes.
felt that from you. I
Yes.
felt that from you when you
Yes.
started to talk about it. Now, so I thought this is
Then at the end of
beautiful.
the 2.5 hours, people are going, "Oh, is that the time? Oh, we could have just carried on." Because I think we all crave deep and meaningful conversation.
Perhaps
And
we
that,
do.
that gives it in spades, yeah.
Perhaps
Yeah.
we do.
And the time just
So
goes really quickly. Mm.
exactly.
And
So Jude,
everyone.
we have come to the top of the hour here, and
Okay.
so I will be sharing this recording far and wide, and everyone's going to receive it, of course, with the contact of how to get into contact with Jude. And if it's inspired you and you feel that it would be something helpful for you or people around you, then do start something yourself in your own area or online. It feels like it's a really needed thing of a sort of gelling and connecting together thing. So, Jude, meanwhile, thank you so much for sharing and
Well,
encouraging us to talk and allowing the space for us to do that, to talk with it, share a little bit here and talking about the death cafes. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining this call. And I hope you got something meaningful out of it. Thank you so much, Jude. I really appreciate it. And if you do want to get in contact with Jude, look out for your emails, and I'm going to be sending it to your emails as well. Thank you so much, everybody. And I'll draw it to a close then. And until the next podcast, thank you so much, everybody, for taking part. And Jude, if you wanted to say like a last word or a last a parting something to share, is there something you would like to say as a last word? And I'll leave the last word to you. Um, Something to say to people, or advice, or a guidance, or a word, or is there something you'd like to?
um, just yeah, very briefly, if you're curious, then find a way to express it. There is also so many books out there as well, which are also fascinating if you do want to explore mortality, and also other cultures as well, which you can almost read as fiction if you like. But to learn about other cultures and rituals as well is enormously not only interesting, but meaningful as well. How does the rest of the world do it as well? But yeah, thank
Exactly.
you for everybody who came. It's an honour to get the opportunity to talk to you all
Wonderful.
about my passion and determination to bring death to life.
Bring death to life. Thank you so much. Thank you
Rock.
so much, Jude. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye.